The night was quiet, but the silence did not prepare anyone for what was about to unfold. A group of officers, filled with arrogance and prejudice, believed they could manipulate the system to their advantage. They thought they had found the perfect target, a woman they assumed would be powerless to resist. What they didn't know was that she wasn't just another name they could bury beneath lies and false evidence. She was someone far more formidable, someone with strength and connections they could never imagine. This is not just a story about corruption, it's about underestimating the wrong person. Welcome back to Talecraft, where we dive deep into stories that reveal shocking truths and unforgettable lessons. And if you're here for the first time, let me ask you a question. What would you do if powerful people tried to frame you for something you didn't do? Think about it. Would you run, would you fight, or would you rise in a way that leaves them frozen in regret? If this kind of story sparks your curiosity, make sure you like, share, and subscribe because we have many tales that shake the ground beneath authority. Now let's set the stage for what really happened. This story is not fiction. It is a reflection of the very real injustices that countless people face when those sworn to protect twist their power into a weapon of oppression. In this case, the officers thought they were untouchable. They planted lies, designed a trap, and prepared to destroy the life of an innocent woman. But what they couldn't see was the storm brewing quietly behind her calm eyes, the hidden truth about who she really was, and the allies waiting in the shadows who would make sure justice was served. And why does this matter? Because it isn't just about one woman or one set of corrupt cops, it's about the bigger picture. Every time authority tries to crush the powerless, every time lies are dressed up as truth, it chips away at the foundation of justice. But when courage and truth rise, they do more than restore one life, they light a fire of hope for many others. This story matters because it shows us how arrogance can blind even those in power, and how resilience can shatter the strongest walls of deceit. Her name was Maya Johnson, and to anyone who knew her, she was the kind of woman who carried herself with quiet dignity. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't loud, but the strength in her presence was undeniable. Maya was a teacher, a mentor, and a leader in her community. Children adored her, parents respected her, and colleagues admired her discipline. She had dedicated her life to lifting others, building a foundation of hope in a neighborhood that often felt overlooked. But behind that calm smile was a woman who had weathered storms most couldn't imagine. She had known hardship, yet never let it harden her heart. And though no one around her guessed, her resilience came from a past that had trained her in ways far beyond the classroom walls. On a typical morning, Maya would rise before dawn, her day beginning with coffee, a stack of lesson plans, and her journal filled with handwritten goals. To the outside world, she was simply preparing for her students. But her routine was more than that. It was discipline, a practice she had mastered long ago in another chapter of her life. She believed in precision, in structure, and in never being caught off guard. Those who loved her saw only a devoted educator, but those who watched closely would notice how she moved with a deliberate calmness, always aware of her surroundings. Even the smallest details, how she locked her door, how she scanned the street before stepping into her car, hinted at something deeper, something most people would never understand. Maya wasn't wealthy, nor did she live in luxury. Her home was modest, her clothes simple, but she carried herself like someone who didn't need to prove her worth to anyone. Neighbors often said, when Maya walks into a room, the atmosphere changes. It wasn't arrogance, it was presence. She radiated an authority that couldn't be faked. That was exactly what unnerved the cops who would later target her. They couldn't put their finger on it, but something about her seemed unshakable. And in their arrogance, they mistook her composure for vulnerability, thinking she was just another black woman they could push around. They didn't know that behind her grace was a steel spine forged in places they could never step into without breaking. What made Maya's story even more powerful was her role outside the classroom. She volunteered at shelters, spoke at youth programs, and advocated for families caught in cycles of poverty and violence. She was the voice reminding young people that they were more than statistics, more than the labels society tried to pin on them. This made her respected, but it also made her a target. Power structures don't like voices that can't be silenced. And while Maya never went looking for conflict, her very existence as a strong, outspoken black woman was enough to draw the attention of those who wanted control. The cops who would later plot against her saw her influence, her strength, and decided she needed to be put in her place. But here's the part they didn't know, the detail that would undo everything they thought they could achieve. Maya wasn't just a teacher, a volunteer, or a community leader. Long before she chose the path of education, she had lived another life, one that demanded discipline, intelligence, and the ability to survive under pressure. She had trained in environments that tested not only her body but her mind, preparing her for challenges far greater than anything the cops could imagine. She had walked through fire and emerged sharper, stronger, and wiser. That past was not something she spoke of, not something she wore like a badge, but it was always there, beneath the surface. And when the time came, that hidden part of her identity would rise like a storm, exposing just how badly they had underestimated her. It started like any ordinary day for Maya, driving home from school with her laptop bag full of lesson plans and notes for tomorrow's classes. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the streets. She had no reason to expect trouble. But trouble has a way of finding those who radiate integrity, and on this evening the wrong people had noticed her. A police car lurked behind, moving too close, its siren silent but its intentions unmistakable. Maya's instincts flared. Something about the way they followed her felt off. The car's lights finally flashed, demanding she pull over. Maya complied immediately, rolling to the side with a calm that concealed the storm inside her. She had encountered authority before, and she knew that fear or aggression would only escalate the situation. As she waited, gripping the steering wheel, she could feel their eyes on her, cold and calculating. The officers were not here for traffic violations. They were here for a setup. They believed she was easy to intimidate, someone who would crumble under pressure. They didn't know her. The first officer approached, his stance aggressive, his voice sharp. "Step out of the car," he commanded. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line, her movements measured and deliberate. She opened the door slowly, her eyes never leaving his. She could sense the second officer circling, looking for any excuse to accuse her, searching for the smallest flaw to manipulate into a crime. The air was thick with tension. This wasn't about law enforcement, it was about prejudice and power, and they had chosen the wrong woman to target. "License and registration," the officer barked, slamming his hand on the hood. Maya reached into her bag, retrieving the documents with steady hands. Every gesture she made was calm, controlled. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. The officer recoiled slightly, surprised by her poise. This wasn't what they expected. They thought fear would show first. But instead, they saw intelligence and composure, and for the first time hesitation flickered across their faces. Then came the attempt to intimidate. The officers tried planting evidence, hinting at violations that didn't exist, weaving a narrative meant to frame her. Maya's mind was already working, analyzing every movement, every word, every misstep they offered. She wasn't just responding, she was calculating. She had faced far greater threats before, threats that tested her in ways civilians could not imagine. And in her heart, she knew that they would not succeed. These cops had no idea who they were dealing with. Tension escalated as they pressured her further, their voices rising. Maya's composure never wavered. Her eyes were sharp, scanning for witnesses, cameras, anything that could expose their lies. And she was already formulating the next steps, the countermoves they could never anticipate. What they intended as a trap was turning into a disaster for them. Every word she spoke chipped away at their narrative, every glance she gave revealed their arrogance and fear. They had underestimated not only her knowledge but her ability to turn the situation on its head. By the time backup was called and the scene grew chaotic, it was clear the power dynamic had shifted. Maya stood upright, every motion deliberate, every breath controlled. The officers realized too late that they were no longer in control. Their plan to frame her had backfired, and the woman they thought they could intimidate was already several moves ahead, ready to expose them. The arrogance that brought them here would be the reason they fell, and Maya's calm determination had just begun to reveal the storm they had provoked. Maya's calm had never been mere composure. It was a shield built from years of discipline, training, and survival. As the officers fumbled with their false evidence, she revealed, almost casually, that she wasn't an ordinary teacher, nor just a respected community leader. The documents they held, the accusations they intended to use, they were worthless in the face of her credentials. She had spent years in a role few could imagine. She had trained elite forces, advised top agencies, and navigated systems that most people wouldn't even know existed. Her quiet presence now carried the weight of undeniable authority. The officers froze, their eyes widening as realization dawned. The arrogance that had guided their actions crumbled, replaced by fear. Maya's connections were not theoretical, they were operational. Every false accusation, every attempt to frame her, was exposed as amateurish and futile. Her calm voice cut through the tension. "You should have asked yourself before you acted," she said. "Do you really know who you're dealing with?" That single sentence transformed the scene. Power had shifted. What had begun as intimidation became a reckoning. Their misjudgment was complete, and the consequences were immediate. Her evidence, prepared quietly over weeks in anticipation of injustice, was meticulous. Emails, records, and witnesses came together to show the truth. She had done nothing wrong, while the officers had orchestrated a blatant abuse of authority. The senior officer's hand trembled as he realized their careers were now in jeopardy. Maya did not raise her voice, she did not need to. Each fact she presented was a hammer striking down the narrative they had built so arrogantly. It was a methodical dismantling of lies, executed with precision and a calm that only someone trained for extreme challenges could maintain. Then came the moment of reckoning. The cops who had tried to intimidate her now faced public scrutiny, legal exposure, and inevitable consequences. The arrogance that had made them feel untouchable evaporated. Maya's colleagues, allies, and legal counsel arrived, surrounding her not as a shield, but as affirmation of her power and legitimacy. Cameras captured every moment. Statements were documented. In every way the narrative was hers to control. The officers' attempts to dominate, to manipulate, to silence her, had failed completely. Through it all, Maya remained composed, almost serene. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the room, assessing each reaction. The shock, the guilt, the panic in the officers' faces, it was all visible. She didn't need to strike, the truth had already done it. And in that stillness, there was a lesson for everyone watching. Strength does not always announce itself with violence or anger. Sometimes it speaks quietly, decisively, and the consequences for those who underestimate it are catastrophic. By the end, the power balance had shifted irrevocably. The officers were no longer the ones in control. Maya had exposed their lies, reclaimed her dignity, and reminded the world that appearances can be deceiving. She had endured intimidation, fear, and injustice, yet her measured response had ensured that truth triumphed over corruption. And as she walked away from the scene, the sense of authority and quiet triumph was undeniable. Those who had tried to frame her would never forget the woman they had underestimated, nor the storm they had inadvertently provoked. The ordeal was over, yet the echoes of what had happened lingered. Maya had faced intimidation, lies, and the threat of injustice, yet she emerged unbroken, stronger than ever. Her courage and intelligence had turned the situation completely around, exposing the officers' arrogance and incompetence. This story wasn't only about her victory, it was a reminder that strength often hides beneath calm, ordinary appearances. Maya's actions showed that those who respect truth, discipline, and resilience can overcome even the most corrupt and powerful forces. Her triumph also sent a message far beyond the immediate confrontation. It was about standing firm in the face of injustice, about refusing to let fear dictate one's life. Maya's response wasn't violent, it was deliberate, informed, and precise. She relied on preparation, foresight, and knowledge to reclaim control. This is a lesson that resonates universally. When you understand your power, when you act with clarity, the world takes notice. Corruption, prejudice, and arrogance are no match for integrity combined with skill. For viewers, this story carries a profound lesson. Life will inevitably confront us with challenges, some unfair, some deeply unjust. How we respond matters. Maya could have panicked, given in, or become a victim of circumstance. Instead, she turned adversity into strength, proving that resilience and careful planning are tools more powerful than brute force. And while not everyone faces the same stakes, the principle remains the same. Prepare, know your worth, and never let others' assumptions define your fate. At Tailcraft, we share stories like Maya's not just to entertain but to inspire. To remind us all that even in moments of darkness, courage and wisdom prevail. What would you have done in Maya's place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every perspective matters, every voice contributes to the conversation about justice, resilience, and standing up against prejudice. Together, we can learn from these extraordinary stories and reflect on our own actions and values. If this story moved you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Tailcraft. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our real-life tales of courage and truth. And remember, the world may underestimate some, but strength, skill, and integrity will always reveal the truth in the end. Stand tall, stay aware, and never forget, sometimes the quietest people are the most powerful.